You know what really grinds my gears? Captain Sarah Chen drummed her fingers against the worn armrest of her command chair, her face a perfect study in exasperated contemplation. The fact that every single alien species out there thinks we're the galactic equivalent of particularly stupid golden retrievers. Her XO, Commander James Rodriguez, didn't even look up from his datapad. That's because you keep trying to make friends with them, Cap. I do not! Last week you tried to teach the Zekas Clothy ambassador how to fist bump. That was diplomacy. They have tentacles, Sarah. The bridge crew of the UES Audacity tried, and largely failed, to suppress their snickers. It was a familiar conversation, one that had played out in various forms ever since humanity had made first contact with the Galactic Council 15 years ago. The Council, in their infinite wisdom, had taken one look at humanity's patchwork fleet of semi-functional starships, our tendency to solve problems by either hugging them or hitting them with a wrench, and our inexplicable ability to survive things that should have killed us, and decided we were clearly some sort of primitive species that had stumbled onto FTL travel by accident. The fact that we had in fact discovered FTL by accidentally spilling coffee on a quantum computer was beside the point. Look, Sarah continued, warming to her topic. I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, if they stopped treating us like we're one step above particularly clever space monkeys, we could all get along better. Did you know the Paxillari representative actually patted me on the head yesterday? Patted. Me. On. The. Head. To be fair, Lieutenant Kumar chimed in from his position at Tactical. You are pretty short, Captain. I will space you, Kumar. Don't test me. The banter might have continued indefinitely, if not for the sudden blaring of proximity alarms. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in their harsh glow as Ensign Park's fingers flew across her navigation console. Multiple ships dropping out of FTL, Captain. Signatures match. Oh shit. The young officer's face went pale. It's the Harvester fleet. And just like that, the relaxed atmosphere evaporated. The Harvesters were the bogeyman of the galaxy, a species that lived up to their name by systematically stripping worlds of all organic material to fuel their massive bioships. They weren't part of the Galactic Council. They were the reason the Council existed in the first place, a threat so terrible that it had forced dozens of species to band together for survival. Not that it had helped much. The Harvesters had been steadily advancing through Council space for the past century, and nothing seemed able to stop them. Their bioships were practically invulnerable to conventional weapons, and their strange hive mind psychology made negotiation impossible. How many? Sarah's voice was clipped, professional. 27 bioships, including what appears to be a Queen-class vessel. They're on an intercept course with Outpost Gamma. James swore softly. Outpost Gamma was one of the main refugee processing centers in this sector, currently housing over 50,000 civilians from various species who had fled their homes ahead of the Harvester advance. The station's defenses were minimal. It had been considered safe, deep in Council space. Sarah's fingers tapped a rapid rhythm on her armrest as she thought. The Audacity was a decent ship, but she was just one medium cruiser. Even with the element of surprise, they couldn't hope to take on that many Harvester vessels. Get me a channel to Council Command, she ordered. They need to know about this. The response came quickly, but it wasn't what anyone wanted to hear. The nearest Council defense fleet was 3 days away at maximum FTL. Outpost Gamma would be long gone by then. Well, Sarah said after a moment of heavy silence, I suppose we'll just have to do something stupid. James groaned. I hate it when you say that. Kumar, what's our current stock of those experimental warheads R&D cooked up? 6 Mark 7 disruption warheads, Captain. But they're untested. The eggheads aren't even sure they'll work. Sarah's grin was sharp enough to cut. Perfect. Park, plot us a course that'll let us slingshot around that gas giant. Rodriguez, get me everything we have on Harvester bioship anatomy. And somebody wake up Dr. Wells. I want to know if she's finished synthesizing that biomatter solvent she's been working on. The bridge crew scrambled to comply, even as James fixed his captain with a concerned look. Sarah, what exactly are you planning? You know how humans have that weird ability to digest basically anything? How our stomach acid is strong enough to dissolve metal? Yeah? Well, Dr. Wells has been studying that. Turns out, if you concentrate and modify human stomach acid just right, it becomes one hell of a weapon against biological material. And what are Harvester ships made of? James's eyes widened. You want to give their ships indigestion? Better, I want to give them acid reflux from hell. She turned to address the whole bridge. Listen up, people. We're about to do something incredibly dangerous and probably stupid. But there are 50,000 civilians on that station counting on someone to save them. And apparently, we're all they've got. So let's show these cosmic horror wannabes why humans have a reputation for surviving things we really shouldn't. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Dr. Wells, a brilliant if slightly unhinged xenobiochemist, had indeed finished her solvent. The engineering team, led by Chief Torres, worked frantically to modify the disruption warheads to carry the caustic payload. Meanwhile, Sarah and James refined their absolutely insane plan. The Harvester fleet was approaching Outpost Gamma with the inexorable patience of a force of nature. Their bioships were massive, elegant things that looked like someone had crossed a whale with a cathedral, and then decided to make it out of bone and muscle instead of stone. They were beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. They were also, as Sarah liked to point out, basically just really big space animals. And like any animal, they had to have vulnerabilities. All right, Sarah addressed her crew as they made their final preparations. The plan is simple. We're going to use the gas giant's gravity to build up speed, then slingshot straight through their formation. As we pass, we'll deploy the modified warheads. The disruption field should create temporary weak points in their organic armor, and then the solvent will do what human stomach acid does best. Make something really, really regret what it tried to eat. And if it doesn't work? Someone asked. Then we die gloriously, and some poor bastard has to explain to the council how we managed to get ourselves killed in an even more ridiculous way than usual. She paused. But it's going to work. You know why? Because humans have been solving problems by mixing weird chemicals together and seeing what happens since before we invented writing. It's practically our species' hobby. The plan, much to everyone's surprise, including privately Sarah's, actually worked. Mostly. The slingshot maneuver gave them enough speed to punch through the Harvester formation before they could react, and the warheads deployed perfectly. What no one had expected was just how effective Dr. Wells' solvent would be. The first bioship they hit literally began to melt. Not slowly, not gradually, but in a spectacular display of biological matter suddenly deciding it didn't want to be solid anymore. The chain reaction spread through its massive form like a wave of dissolution, accompanied by psychic screams that made everyone's teeth itch. The other Harvesters, linked by their hive mind, felt their siblings' pain. They reacted exactly as Sarah had hoped, by panicking. The massive ships began to break formation, trying to get away from their dissolving companion, and inadvertently spreading the solvent to themselves in the process. Holy shit, Kumar whispered as they watched the chaos unfold on their screens. We just gave an entire Harvester fleet acid reflux. Technically, Dr. Wells corrected, her eyes gleaming with the special madness only scientists could achieve. We gave them chemical burns. The acid reflux comparison was just a simplified explanation for... Not now, Doc, Sarah interrupted. Kumar, target the Queen class with our remaining warheads. Let's see how their leader likes having human stomach acid for breakfast. The Queen class bioship was twice the size of its companions, a mountain of living tissue that housed the controlling intelligence for this particular fleet. It was already trying to retreat, but the audacity was faster. 3 more warheads struck home, and the massive vessel began to convulse. What followed was simultaneously fascinating and horrifying. The Queen's death throes sent psychic shockwaves through the hive mind, disrupting the remaining bioship's coordination. Some began to attack each other in confusion. Others simply shut down, their controlling intelligence lost. A few tried to flee, but the solvent had already done too much damage. Within an hour, it was over. The mighty Harvester fleet was reduced to slowly dissolving chunks of biomatter scattered across space. The Audacity's crew watched in stunned silence. Well, James finally said, I guess we know the solvent works. Sarah nodded, then opened a channel to Outpost Gamma. This is Captain Chen of the UES Audacity. The Harvester threat has been neutralized. You're safe. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cheering, crying, prayers of thanksgiving in a dozen different languages. But underneath it all was a current of disbelief. How had one human ship managed to do what entire council fleets couldn't? The answer, of course, was simple. Humans are weird. The aftermath was almost as entertaining as the battle itself. The council representatives arrived 3 days later, as promised, only to find the remains of a Harvester fleet slowly dispersing into space. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to horror to grudging admiration. Let me get this straight. The Pexilari representative, the same one who had patted Sarah on the head, said during the formal debriefing, You defeated one of the most dangerous forces in the galaxy. By weaponizing your digestive system? Modified and weaponized, Dr. Wells corrected. The base compound is similar to human gastric acid, but I made some improvements. Would you like to see my notes on the process? I have several theories about potential applications in— I think, the representative interrupted hastily, that we have seen quite enough of human chemical innovations for one day. Sarah couldn't help herself. She reached over and patted the Pexlari on their head equivalent. Don't worry, you'll get used to us eventually. We're full of surprises. The story spread quickly through council space. The species that had dismissed humans as primitive started looking at us differently. After all, any species that could turn their own digestive juices into a weapon capable of destroying harvester bioships was probably worth taking seriously. More importantly, Dr. Wells' solvent proved to be the key to turning the tide against the harvesters. Other human scientists expanded on her work, developing new variants and delivery systems. Within a year, the harvesters were in full retreat, their supposedly invincible bioships vulnerable to what was essentially weaponized heartburn. You know what really grinds my gears now? Sarah asked James months later, as they watched a council defense fleet testing their new anti-harvester weapons. What's that, Cap? The fact that after all this, after we literally saved their collective asses with the power of human weirdness, they're still surprised every time we do something unexpected. She grinned. Want to show them what happens when you mix coffee with quantum computers again? James just sighed. Some things never changed, and humanity's ability to solve problems in the most bizarre ways possible was definitely one of them. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the remaining harvesters added a new rule to their hive mind's collective knowledge. Never, ever, mess with the weird pink primates who can turn their own bodily functions into weapons of mass destruction. They're unpredictable, and they really don't like it when you threaten their friends. It was, all things considered, a pretty good addition to their survival protocols. With all due respect, Captain Chen, the Vexthari scientists' bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Sarah had come to recognize as their species' equivalent of a condescending smile. What you're proposing is theoretically impossible. Theoretically impossible, Sarah repeated slowly, shooting a meaningful look at Commander Rodriguez, who was already pinching the bridge of his nose. James, what's our standard protocol when someone tells us something is theoretically impossible? Do it anyway and bill them for proving their theories wrong, he replied automatically. Though I have to admit, Cap, trying to create a stable wormhole using coffee as a quantum catalyst is pushing it even by our standards. The UES Audacity's briefing room was crowded with both human and alien scientists, all gathered to discuss Sarah's latest innovative solution to their current crisis. After their success against the harvesters, the ship had been assigned to handle particularly unusual threats to Council space, the kind that required thinking so far outside the box that the box was merely a distant memory. Their current problem? A cascade of spatial anomalies threatening to tear apart an inhabited system, caused by the intersection of 3 different species' FTL wake signatures. The Vexthari had spent decades studying similar phenomena and insisted there was no way to safely disperse the building energy. Sarah naturally had other ideas. Look, she said, pulling up a holographic display of Dr. Wells' latest simulations. We already know that coffee has weird effects on quantum systems. That's literally how we discovered FTL travel. By accident, James muttered. The best discoveries are usually accidents. Dr. Wells chimed in cheerfully from her corner, where she was conducting what appeared to be an unauthorized experiment involving 3 different types of energy drinks and a quantum field generator. Did you know I discovered the harvester solvent because I spilled my breakfast smoothie into a petri dish? The Vexthari scientists' bioluminescence took on a distinctly alarmed pattern. You defeat galaxy-threatening enemies through beverage accidents? Sometimes we use food accidents too, Sarah said helpfully. Last month we stopped a runaway AI by feeding it pictures of human cooking experiments. It got so confused trying to understand why we would deliberately combine those ingredients that it crashed itself. What I believe the captain is trying to say, James interrupted before Sarah could further traumatize their alien colleagues, is that human innovation often comes from unexpected places. Dr. Wells, would you explain the actual science behind your proposal? The xenobiochemist perked up, her eyes taking on that slightly manic gleam that everyone had learned to both respect and fear. Of course. You see, the molecular structure of properly brewed coffee, particularly when exposed to specific quantum fields, creates a cascade effect that— What followed was 45 minutes of increasingly enthusiastic technical explanation that managed to combine quantum mechanics, organic chemistry, and what sounded suspiciously like coffee brewing tips. By the end, the Vexthari scientists' bioluminescence had dimmed to a confused flicker, and even James looked a bit lost. So, Sarah summarized, We're going to make a giant space cappuccino and use it to knit space-time back together. That is a gross oversimplification of an incredibly complex quantum biochemical process, Dr. Wells protested. Then she paused. But also technically accurate, yes. The Vexthari scientist made a sound that their universal translator couldn't quite interpret. And you believe this will work because nothing in the universe makes less sense than human biochemistry interacting with quantum fields, Sarah said cheerfully. We're going to fight chaos with chaos. That's not, the scientist began, then stopped, their patterns shifting rapidly as they processed something. Wait, your species regularly consumes a beverage that can alter quantum states? Oh, coffee's not even the weirdest thing we drink, Sarah assured them. Wait until you hear about energy drinks, or that time someone brought moonshine onto a research station and accidentally discovered how to make solid light. The actual execution of their plan was, like most human solutions, equal parts careful scientific calculation and what appeared to be complete madness. The Audacity's engineering team, led by Chief Torres, had modified their deflector array to distribute an aerosolized mixture of specially prepared coffee. Dr. Wells had been very specific about the roast and brewing method, into the quantum field generated by the spatial anomalies. You know, Kumar said, as they watched the swirling brown cloud begin to interact with the rippling distortions in space. When I joined Starfleet, I didn't expect to be shooting coffee at tears in reality. Really? Park asked from her station. That's exactly what I expected. Have you met humans? The Vexthari observation team watched in what appeared to be horrified fascination as the coffee cloud began to glow with an inner light, quantum particles dancing through it in patterns that shouldn't have been possible according to at least 3 different laws of physics. The quantum field is stabilizing, Dr. Wells reported, her eyes fixed on her readings. The coffee molecules are creating a lattice effect that's actually strengthening the local space-time fabric. It's like we're giving space itself a caffeine boost. Please don't ever phrase it that way in the official report, James begged. The process took several hours, during which the crew traded increasingly ridiculous coffee-related puns, and the Vexthari scientists appeared to be questioning every decision that had led them to this moment. But in the end it worked. The spatial anomalies were dispersed, the system was saved, and humanity had once again solved a problem in a way that would give physics professors nightmares. I don't understand, the lead Vexthari scientist admitted later, their patterns showing genuine distress. We had run every possible simulation. We had applied every known physical law. It should have been impossible. Sarah smiled and offered them a cup of coffee. Here's the thing about humans and impossible things. We don't really believe in them. To us, impossible just means no one's found the right combination of weird ideas yet. Is that why your species keeps solving critical problems with solutions that sound like jokes? Partially, Sarah admitted. But mostly, it's because the universe is vast and strange and wonderful. And sometimes the best way to deal with that is to be vast and strange and wonderful right back at it. The Vexthari scientist considered this, then carefully accepted the coffee. Perhaps our theoretical models need to be updated to account for human creativity. That's the spirit, though you might want to wait on drinking that until Dr. Wells checks it for quantum effects. Last week, someone in engineering got their coffee mixed up with an experiment and spent 3 hours perceiving time backwards. The news of their success spread quickly through Council space, adding to humanity's growing reputation for solving seemingly impossible problems in ways that gave more conventional species anxiety. There was talk of establishing a new scientific division specifically to study what they were now calling human-induced quantum phenomena, though several council members argued that trying to understand human methods would only lead to madness. They were probably right. You know what really grinds my gears? Sarah asked James later, as they watched Dr. Wells try to explain to a panel of council scientists why she needed funding to study the quantum properties of various human foods. Everything, he guessed. The fact that after all this time, they still act surprised when we do something weird. She grinned. Want to tell them about that time we fixed a temporal paradox with a rubber duck? James just sighed and reached for his coffee, carefully checking that it was regular coffee and not the quantum-enhanced variety. Some stories, he decided, the galaxy wasn't ready for yet. Somewhere in the vast archives of the Galactic Council, a new advisory was added to the official guidelines for interacting with humans. Never tell them something is impossible. They will take it as a challenge, and their solution will probably involve either food, beverages, or both. The results, while generally effective, may cause temporary disruptions in the fundamental laws of physics. This is considered normal human behavior. It wasn't the most dignified addition to the guidelines, but it was certainly one of the most accurate. And now, the RX Theory chairperson announced to the assembled delegates of the 487th Annual Galactic Science Conference, Dr. Amanda Wells of the United Earthship Audacity will present her paper on cross-species applications of human-induced quantum phenomena in crisis resolution. The massive auditorium, filled with representatives from over 300 species, fell into an uneasy silence. After the coffee-based wormhole incident, Dr. Wells had become something of a celebrity in council space, though whether that celebrity status was based on admiration or horror remained a subject of heated debate. Captain Sarah Chen, sitting in the front row alongside Commander Rodriguez, couldn't help but grin as her ship's resident mad scientist bounded onto the stage with the energy of someone who had definitely tested her latest quantum-enhanced energy drink on herself. "This is going to be amazing," she whispered to James. "This is going to be a diplomatic incident," he corrected. "Same thing." Dr. Wells adjusted the holographic display and beamed at her audience. "Thank you all for coming. Today I'll be discussing how various human consumables, when properly processed and applied, can solve supposedly impossible problems. We'll start with a practical demonstration." The chairperson's translator crackled. "I'm sorry, did you say practical demonstration?" "Of course. Science is all about hands-on experience." She pulled out what looked suspiciously like a thermos. "Now, who here has ever wanted to see what happens when you combine quantum-entangled hot sauce with a temporal anomaly?" James groaned. "Sarah, please tell me that's not the same hot sauce that temporarily gave Engineer Martinez the ability to see through walls." No, Sarah assured him. "That batch was confiscated by Council security. This is the new version that Dr. Wells says might let people see through time." "That's not better!" But it was too late. Dr. Wells had already begun her demonstration, combining the mysterious contents of her thermos with what appeared to be a miniature temporal distortion she had somehow smuggled into the conference. The results were interesting. Several delegates reported briefly experiencing their future and past selves simultaneously. A Pexlari physicist spontaneously evolved into their species' next evolutionary stage for approximately 3 minutes before reverting, and the potted plant on the speaker's podium developed sentience and began working on its own unified field theory. "As you can see," Dr. Wells continued cheerfully while chaos erupted around her, "human culinary innovations, when properly modified, can produce effects that transcend conventional physical laws. This has numerous practical applications, which I'll demonstrate in my next experiment." "No!" The entire audience, including Sarah and James, shouted in unison. The chairperson, who had aged backwards to adolescence and then returned to normal during the first demonstration, quickly called for a recess. As security personnel attempted to confiscate Dr. Wells' remaining samples, she had backup thermoses, of course, Sarah found herself cornered by a group of council scientists. Captain Chen, the lead researcher, a Zexaclothi whose tentacles were still slightly transparent from the demonstration's effects, demanded, "How does your species continue to function when you regularly consume substances that can alter fundamental reality?" Sarah shrugged. "Honestly, most of us just call it Tuesday." "But it defies all logic, all physical laws." "Yeah, we get that a lot, but have you considered that maybe the universe just really likes it when we try weird things? I mean, how else do you explain the fact that we discovered faster-than-light travel by spilling coffee, cured the common cold with modified pickle juice, and solved climate change with engineered bacteria that we originally developed to make better cheese?" The scientists exchanged worried looks. One of them consulted a datapad. "According to our records, in the past year alone, human scientists have violated the laws of thermodynamics 73 times, created 5 new fundamental forces, 3 of which only exist on Tuesdays, and somehow made a sandwich that doubles as a quantum computer." "The sandwich thing was actually an accident," James added helpfully. "Someone in the Audacity's mess hall got their lunch mixed up with one of Dr. Wells' experiments. Though I have to admit, it did make surprisingly efficient calculations before it went moldy and briefly achieved consciousness." Before the conversation could continue, alarms began blaring throughout the conference center. The massive view screens that lined the auditorium's walls flickered to life, showing a massive vessel appearing in orbit around the station. "Oh no," the chairperson's voice cracked over the speakers. "It's the Quantum Collective." The Quantum Collective was a relatively new threat to council space. A group of rogue scientists from various species who had decided that the best way to advance technology was to conduct extremely dangerous experiments without regard for safety, ethics, or basic common sense. They had already destroyed 3 uninhabited systems with their tests, and now they apparently had their sights set on the conference. Their ship is generating some kind of reality-warping field, one of the station's technicians reported. They're trying to force our space to operate under different physical laws. Sarah turned to James with a grin that he knew all too well. Hey, James? No. You don't even know what I'm going to say. You're going to suggest we let Dr. Wells combat their reality-warping field with whatever unholy combination of human food and quantum physics she's been working on lately. Okay, maybe you did know what I was going to say. Before James could object further, Dr. Wells had already pulled out another thermos. Actually, Captain, I've been working on something special. You know how some human foods are so spicy that people say they're hot enough to warp reality? Oh no. Oh yes. I've been experimenting with ghost peppers exposed to quantum fields. The initial tests suggested they might be able to temporarily rewrite local physics, but I hadn't found a practical application yet. The station shuddered as the quantum collective's reality-warping field intensified. Outside, stars began to change color as local physics started to break down. Sarah's grin widened. Well, Doctor, I'd say this qualifies as a practical application. James, call the Audacity and have them prepare to broadcast Dr. Wells' recipe through the main deflector array. What followed was either the most brilliant or most ridiculous moment in Council history, depending on who you asked. As the Quantum Collective attempted to impose their version of physics on local space, the Audacity responded by essentially hitting them with weaponized hot sauce at a quantum level. The results were spectacular. The competing fields of altered physics collided in a display that had nearby sensors simultaneously registering it as a light show, a sound wave, a solid object, and a particularly aggressive math equation. Several witnesses later claimed they could taste colors during the event, while others reported briefly understanding the meaning of life, though they forgot it immediately afterward. When reality finally settled back to normal, the Quantum Collective's ship was still there, but it had been transformed into what appeared to be a giant crystal snow globe containing a perfect miniature replica of itself, complete with tiny figures running around in panic inside. Huh, Dr. Wells said, studying her readings. That's new. Usually the quantum ghost peppers just make things temporarily exist in all possible states at once. I wonder if they reacted with the collective's field to create some kind of reality snapshot effect? The council scientist stared at her in horror. You didn't know what would happen? Of course not. That's what makes it science. In the aftermath, as council security carefully contained the snow globe ship, which occasionally played tiny musical notes when shaken, and Dr. Wells eagerly compiled her data, Sarah found herself once again trying to explain human methods to bewildered aliens. You have to understand, she told the conference's ethics committee. Humans have a very particular approach to problem solving. When we encounter something that doesn't make sense, our first instinct is to either eat it, throw it at other things, or combine it with something else to see what happens. And this works? One of the committee members asked weakly. More often than you'd think. I mean, sure, sometimes we accidentally create temporary singularities or briefly reverse entropy, but it usually works out in the end. Usually? Well, there was that one time we accidentally made time go sideways instead of forward, but Dr. Wells fixed it with a quantum-enhanced cup of chamomile tea. The committee decided that the best course of action was to create a new scientific classification specifically for human discoveries. Functional but inexplicable phenomena do not attempt to replicate without human supervision. Later, back on the Audacity, Sarah reviewed the conference footage while enjoying a cup of perfectly normal, non-reality warping coffee. You know what really grinds my gears? She asked James. If you say it's the fact that people are still surprised by human solutions, I'm going to start keeping a tally. Actually, I was going to say it's annoying that the Quantum Collective interrupted Dr. Wells's presentation. She had this great experiment planned involving quantum-entangled maple syrup and a small black hole. James carefully set down his own coffee. Sarah, I say this as your friend and XO. Please never finish that sentence. Somewhere in the depths of council space, the incident was added to the ever-growing file of things humans have done that probably shouldn't be possible. A note was appended. Current theory suggests that human innovation operates on its own set of physical laws, which appear to be based primarily on the question, what if we tried it anyway? It wasn't a very scientific explanation, but it was the best anyone had managed to come up with. To be continued.